The signal came from the edge of human space on a Tuesday morning. Commander Zektar of the Zephyrian Coalition fleet studied the intercepted transmissions with growing confidence. The humans were broadcasting their military exercises in clear channels, as if they had nothing to hide. Their ships moved in predictable formations. Their weapons fired in standard patterns. Everything about them screamed primitive warfare. "Look at this," Zektar called to his science officer, pointing at the holographic display. "They use chemical propulsion for their smaller craft." Chemical? Their largest ships barely reach 0.2 light speed. Our scouts could outrun their entire fleet while flying backwards. The science officer, a thin creature with 4 arms and bright yellow skin, nodded eagerly. "The biological scans are even better, Commander. These humans are soft, no natural armor, no claws, no poison sacs. They need artificial atmosphere to survive in space. They cannot even see in the dark properly. They are weaker than Terran cattle." Zektar smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. The Zephyrian Coalition had conquered 47 star systems in the past century. They had faced warriors with diamond-hard scales, energy-based life forms that could phase through solid matter, and hive minds that coordinated millions of soldiers with perfect precision. Every single species had fallen to Coalition might. These humans would be the easiest conquest yet. "They sent us a message yesterday," the communications officer reported. "Something about peaceful trade and cultural exchange. They want to meet at a neutral location to discuss cooperation." "Peaceful trade," Zektar laughed. "How refreshing. It has been years since we encountered a species naive enough to believe in such things. Send them our response. Tell them we accept their invitation to meet. But first we will give them a small demonstration of Coalition power. A lesson in reality." The War Council met within hours. 40 Coalition commanders gathered in the massive strategy chamber, representing 20 different species united under Zephyrian leadership. The holographic star map showed human territory, 12 systems scattered across a relatively small region of space. Their colonies were lightly defended, their trade routes predictable, their response times slow. "We could take all of human space in a single coordinated strike," General Moxtar suggested. He was a massive creature with stone-like skin and 6 arms, each ending in clawed hands. "Why waste time with demonstrations?" "Because we want them to surrender quickly," Zektar explained. "A total war means damage to their infrastructure, destruction of their population, loss of valuable resources. Better to break their spirit with a single decisive blow. Show them they cannot win, and they will give up without destroying what we want to take." The plan was simple and elegant. 3 human colonies would be attacked simultaneously, not their heavily populated core worlds, but their outer settlements. Places with enough strategic value to matter, but small enough that the Coalition could overwhelm them quickly. The humans would see their defenses crumble in minutes. They would realize resistance was hopeless. They would surrender. Admiral Vexquin, the Coalition's most experienced commander, was chosen to lead the assault. She had personally defeated the Silicon Confederation and the Plasma Lords. Her reputation alone was enough to make most species consider surrender. "Take 3 battle groups," Zektar ordered. 50 ships should be more than enough. Actually, that might be too many. We do not want to completely destroy everything. 50 ships against 3 human colonies? Vexquin looked surprised. "Commander, I could take those targets with a single cruiser and 2 escorts. Why waste so many resources?" "For the psychological impact," Zektar explained. "When the humans see 50 Coalition warships appear in their space, they will understand immediately that resistance is impossible. Fear is a powerful weapon, Admiral. Sometimes it wins wars before the first shot is fired." The assault began exactly 72 hours later. Vexquin's fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edges of 3 human systems simultaneously: Kepler Station, Haven Colony, and New Detroit. The timing was perfect. All 3 targets were caught completely off guard. The Coalition ships moved in toward their objectives with overwhelming confidence. At Kepler Station, the humans had exactly 6 patrol ships and a single military outpost. The math was simple: 50 Coalition vessels against 6 human ships. This would be over in minutes. Vexquin ordered the attack with casual indifference, already planning her victory report. Then the humans began to fight. The 6 patrol ships did not run. They did not surrender. They did not even seem particularly surprised. Instead, they immediately split into 3 groups and began moving in patterns that made no sense. Their ships were smaller and slower than Coalition vessels. but they moved like dancers, like they had practiced these exact maneuvers 1,000 times. "What are they doing?" Vexaquin demanded, watching the tactical display with growing confusion. The human ships were not trying to escape. They were not charging directly into battle. They were positioning themselves in a complex three-dimensional formation that served no obvious purpose. The answer came 30 seconds later. The human ships opened fire simultaneously, but not at the Coalition fleet. They targeted the space around the Coalition ships, filling specific regions with missile barrages and energy blasts. For a moment, Vexaquin thought they had missed completely. Then she realized what they had done. They had turned space itself into a weapon. The Coalition ships were flying directly into a three-dimensional maze of explosions, energy fields, and debris. Ships that tried to maneuver found themselves flying into carefully placed obstacles. Ships that maintained course found themselves taking hits from multiple angles as human weapons fire converged on predicted positions. "Impossible," Vexaquin whispered. "They calculated our movements in advance. All of our movements. Every ship, every vector, every evasive maneuver. How did they know what we were going to do before we did it?" The battle that should have lasted 5 minutes stretched into 2 hours. Coalition ships found themselves outmaneuvered by vessels that should have been completely inferior. Human tactics made no sense according to any known military doctrine, but they worked with devastating effectiveness. When Coalition ships tried to group together for concentrated fire, human ships would appear behind them. When they tried to spread out to avoid ambushes, humans would suddenly concentrate their entire force on single targets. The humans seemed to know exactly what the Coalition would do in response to every situation, not just predicting their general strategy, but anticipating specific decisions from individual ship commanders. It was like fighting an enemy that could read minds. At Haven Colony, the situation was even worse. The humans had 12 ships there, but they fought like they had 50. They used the colony's asteroid field like it was purpose-built for warfare, hiding behind rocks that provided perfect cover while offering clear firing lines on Coalition positions. Every time Coalition ships tried to flush them out, they found that the humans had somehow already moved to better positions. "Admiral," the communications officer called out urgently, "we are receiving casualty reports from all 3 battle sites. We have lost 11 ships at Kepler, 14 at Haven, and 16 at New Detroit. The humans they are destroying us." Vexaquin stared at the tactical displays in horror. How had this happened? The Coalition had overwhelming numerical superiority, better technology, more experienced crews. They should have won this battle in minutes. Instead, they were being systematically dismantled by an enemy that should not have been able to put up any meaningful resistance. "Order all ships to withdraw to minimum safe distance," she commanded. "Regroup and prepare for bombardment from long range. If we cannot defeat them in ship-to-ship combat, we will destroy them from a distance they cannot threaten us." The bombardment worked, eventually. Coalition ships pulled back to extreme range and fired their heavy weapons at the human positions. The humans could not fight back effectively at such distances. One by one, their ships were destroyed or disabled. The colonies themselves were reduced to smoking ruins, but the victory felt hollow. The Coalition had won, but at a terrible cost. 41 Coalition ships had been destroyed or severely damaged. 41 ships lost to an enemy that should have been completely helpless. Thousands of Coalition warriors were dead. The demonstration of power had turned into a bloody nightmare. When Vexaquin returned to report to the War Council, the massive strategy chamber was silent. The holographic displays showed the aftermath of the battle. Debris fields where Coalition ships had died. Casualty reports scrolling endlessly down multiple screens. Commander Zektar looked like he had aged 10 years in 3 days. "Explain to me," Zektar said quietly, "how 50 of our best ships barely managed to defeat 24 human vessels. Explain to me how we lost more than 80% of our assault force to an enemy we believed was primitive and helpless. They fight like no species we have ever encountered," Vexaquin reported, her voice shaken. "Their tactics are completely unpredictable, but incredibly effective. They seem to know our capabilities better than we know theirs. Every move we made, they had already prepared a counter. It was like they had fought this exact battle before many times." The emergency session of the Coalition High Command lasted 18 hours. Representatives from every member species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall on Zephyria Prime. The massive chamber, built to intimidate visiting delegations with its size and grandeur, felt cramped and oppressive as angry voices echoed from every corner. "This is unacceptable," Supreme Admiral Kexthera roared, her forearms gesturing wildly. "The Coalition has never suffered such humiliation, never. We are the most powerful military force in galactic history. We do not lose battles to primitive species with chemical rockets and metal ships." Commander Zektar stood at the center of the circular chamber, feeling very small under the weight of 1,000 hostile stares. Every species in the Coalition was represented here: the crystal-skinned Vorthak, the energy beings of the Nexus Collective, the insectoid swarms of Hive Queen Tsarka. All of them united in their fury at what they saw as his failure. "Explain yourself," demanded High Counselor Vexmora, the ancient leader of the Coalition's ruling council. Her voice carried the authority of 5 centuries of conquest. "How did our forces suffer 82% casualties against 24 primitive vessels?" Zektar activated the holographic display, showing the tactical recordings from the 3 battle sites. The assembled commanders watched in silence as human ships moved in impossible patterns, turning space itself into a weapon, outmaneuvering Coalition forces that should have crushed them easily. "Their tactics are unlike anything in our databases," he reported. "They fight with perfect coordination, as if every ship is controlled by a single mind. But unlike hive species, they show individual creativity and adaptation. They predicted our movements before we made them. They knew our standard responses to every situation." "You are making excuses," General Thokvar accused. The massive Craxian warrior stood nearly 3 meters tall, his stone-like hide scarred from countless battles. "The humans got lucky. Nothing more. They cannot repeat such success against a properly prepared force. Can they not?" Zektar challenged. "Our intelligence indicates this was not their main fleet. These were border patrol ships and colony defense forces. If their weakest units can destroy 50 of our best vessels, what can their core military accomplish?" An uncomfortable murmur ran through the assembly. The Coalition had built its empire on the principle of overwhelming force. They had never encountered a species that could match their military might, let alone exceed it. The idea that humanity might be genuinely superior in warfare was impossible to accept. "We have over 10,000 capital ships," Admiral Kexthera declared. "They have perhaps 200. The mathematics are simple. We will mobilize the entire Coalition fleet and crush them completely. No more limited demonstrations. No more restraint. Total war." The vote was unanimous. Every species, every commander, every representative agreed. The Coalition would gather its full military might and destroy humanity once and for all. Messages went out across Coalition space, recalling every fleet, every battle group, every independent squadron. For the first time in Coalition history, their entire military force would be united for a single campaign. The mobilization took 6 months. Ships arrived at the staging area from across the galaxy. Sleek Zephyrian cruisers, massive Craxian dreadnoughts, swarms of Vorthak fighters, energy constructs from the Nexus Collective. The combined fleet stretched across an entire star system, 10,000 warships representing the combined military might of 47 species. Admiral Kexthera took personal command of the armada. She stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Eternal Victory, and watched the fleet displays with satisfaction. The humans had perhaps 300 ships total. The Coalition had brought 10,000. The outcome was mathematically certain. "They will see us coming," her tactical officer warned. "A fleet this large cannot approach undetected. They will have time to prepare their defenses." "Good," Kexthera replied. "Let them prepare. Let them gather every ship they have. Let them fortify their worlds and sharpen their weapons. It will not matter. When they see 10,000 Coalition warships approaching their territory, they will understand that resistance is hopeless. Perhaps they will even surrender without fighting." The fleet began its advance toward human space. They moved slowly, deliberately, making no effort at stealth. The Coalition wanted humanity to see them coming. Fear was a weapon as powerful as any gun or missile. Let the humans contemplate their doom for weeks while the unstoppable armada approached. But when the Coalition fleet reached the edge of human territory, they found something unexpected. The humans were waiting for them. Earth's defense fleet hung in space like a silver cloud, 300 ships arranged in a perfect sphere around the Coalition's approach vector. They were outnumbered more than 30 to 1. According to every military principle, they should have been running. Instead, they waited with calm precision, as if the odds meant nothing to them. Impressive, Admiral Kexathera admitted, studying the human formation. They know they cannot win, but they refuse to surrender. There is honor in that, I suppose. Signal all ships. We will give them a chance to yield with dignity. The message was broadcast across all frequencies in 17 different languages. The coalition offered terms: immediate surrender in exchange for quick deaths for their soldiers and slavery, rather than extermination for their civilians. It was more generous than most species received. The human response came from Admiral Sarah Chen, commander of Earth's Defense Forces. Her face appeared on the main screen, a middle-aged woman with graying hair and tired eyes. She looked like someone who had seen too many wars and was weary of fighting. Admiral Kexathara, she said formally, we appreciate your offer, but we must decline. Earth's sovereignty is not negotiable. If you wish to claim our territory, you will have to take it by force. Very well, Kexathara replied. You have chosen death over surrender. I will grant your wish. All ships advance and engage. Show them the power of the coalition. The battle began at maximum range. 10,000 coalition ships opened fire simultaneously, filling space with energy beams and missiles. The human fleet responded with their own weapons, but the difference in firepower was absurd. It was like watching someone try to stop an avalanche by throwing pebbles. For 30 minutes, the coalition pounded the human formation with overwhelming firepower. Ships exploded. Debris scattered. Energy shields collapsed under the constant barrage. The human sphere began to break apart as vessels were destroyed or disabled. They are breaking, the tactical officer reported with satisfaction. Hull breaches on multiple human vessels. Their formation is collapsing. Victory is imminent. But Admiral Chen's voice came across the communications again, calm and unhurried. All ships execute thunderstorm protocols. Authorization code Omega Black. Repeat, Omega Black authorization confirmed. What is thunderstorm? Kexathara demanded. Her intelligence staff scrambled to check their databases but found nothing. The human fleet began to move in new patterns, their ships spreading out and taking positions that made no tactical sense. Then space began to change. It started as a shimmer, like heat waves rising from a hot planet's surface. But this was happening in the vacuum of space where such distortions were impossible. The shimmer spread outward from the human fleet, washing over coalition ships like an invisible tide. Admiral, the science officer called out urgently, we are detecting massive gravitational anomalies throughout the battle zone. The readings make no sense. It is like space itself is becoming unstable. The first coalition ships to be caught in the anomaly simply stopped existing. Not destroyed, not damaged. They vanished as if they had never been there. One moment a massive Craxian dreadnought was firing its weapons. The next moment there was empty space where it had been. Impossible, Kexathera whispered. What kind of weapon can delete matter from existence? The anomaly continued to spread, moving through the coalition fleet like a plague. Ships tried to retreat, but the distortion moved faster than they could flee. Entire battle groups disappeared in flashes of twisted light. The massive coalition armada began to shrink as its vessels were erased from reality. All ships retreat, Kexathara ordered desperately. Maximum velocity. Get clear of the anomaly field. But it was too late. The human ships had positioned themselves perfectly to trap the coalition fleet inside the expanding zone of destruction. Every escape route was blocked. The 10,000 ship armada was caught in a cage of impossible physics. Admiral Chen's voice came across the communications one final time. You should have accepted our offer of peaceful coexistence. This weapon was never meant to be used, but you gave us no choice. The anomaly reached its maximum size and suddenly collapsed, taking 90% of the coalition fleet with it. Where 10,000 warships had been, only empty space remained. A few hundred vessels on the outer edge of the formation managed to escape, but the rest were gone, simply gone. Admiral Kexathara stared at her tactical displays in absolute horror. The greatest military force in galactic history had been destroyed in minutes by a weapon that should not exist. Her flagship was one of the few survivors, damaged and alone in the emptiness where her fleet had been. How? She asked the universe. How is this possible? What kind of species builds weapons that can delete matter from reality? Admiral Chen's image appeared. The transmission from Admiral Kexathera reached Coalition High Command 3 days after the destruction of the Great Armada. The message was brief and devastating. Fleet destroyed. 10,000 ships lost. Human weapons unknown origin. Impossible technology. Request immediate reinforcement and new strategic assessment. The emergency session that followed was unlike anything in Coalition history. The Great Assembly Hall stood half empty. Many of the species' representatives had been aboard the flagship vessels of the destroyed fleet. Those who remained sat in stunned silence as the tactical recordings played on the massive screens. Supreme Counselor Vex Mora watched the impossible footage with growing horror. 10,000 ships, the accumulated military might of 5 centuries of conquest, deleted from existence in minutes. No explosions, no debris, no energy signatures. The vessels simply ceased to exist, as if reality itself had rejected their presence. "This is not possible," High Admiral Thokmaran declared. "No species in galactic history has possessed such weapons. Matter cannot simply be erased. The laws of physics forbid it." "Tell that to our missing fleets," General Caxthul replied bitterly. The massive Vorlak commander had lost his entire battle group in the attack. "The humans have weapons that our science cannot explain and our tactics cannot counter. We must reconsider our approach." "Reconsider?" Admiral Rexkala roared. "The Coalition does not retreat. We do not reconsider. We find a way to match their weapons and destroy them completely." But even as the commanders argued, new reports were arriving that would change everything. Coalition listening posts throughout the galaxy were detecting strange energy signatures, brief spikes of exotic radiation that appeared and disappeared without warning. The signatures were moving. They were approaching Coalition territory from multiple directions, and they matched no known starship propulsion system. The first attack came at dawn on Xerion Prime, a major Coalition shipyard in the outer territories. The planet's orbital defense platforms detected incoming ships 30 seconds before they arrived. Vessels that appeared from nowhere, their approach hidden by some form of advanced stealth technology. There were only 12 ships. Against Xerion's defenses of over 300 platforms and 2 full battle fleets, it should have been a brief engagement. The Coalition forces opened fire immediately, filling space around the approaching vessels with enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The human ships moved through the barrage like ghosts. Energy beams passed through them without effect. Missiles exploded harmlessly against invisible barriers. The 12 vessels continued their approach without slowing, untouched by weapons that should have vaporized them instantly. "What are they?" Admiral Vexkrin demanded from his command station. "Ships cannot phase through energy. This violates every known law of physics." The answer came when the human vessels finally returned fire. Their weapons were unlike anything the Coalition had ever seen. Beams of twisted space that bent reality around their targets, causing ships to fold in on themselves like paper. Platforms that had stood for centuries crumpled into impossible shapes before disappearing entirely. The attack lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it was over, Xerion Prime's entire orbital defense network was gone. 200 battle stations, 50 dreadnoughts, and countless smaller vessels had been eliminated without the human ships taking a single hit in return. The 12 vessels vanished as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving behind only empty space and terrified survivors. Similar attacks began occurring throughout Coalition territory. Small fleets of strange ships would appear without warning, destroy everything in their path with impossible weapons, then disappear before reinforcements could arrive. The vessels seemed to phase through solid matter, ignore energy attacks, and bend the laws of physics to their will. "They are not using the same technology as their main fleet," Chief Science Officer Zal Torin reported to the Emergency Command Council. "These ships operate on completely different principles. Where their previous weapons deleted matter from existence, these new vessels seem to exist partially outside normal space-time. How many different types of impossible weapons do they have?" Supreme Counselor Vexmora demanded. "We do not know," Zal Torin admitted. "But based on the attack patterns and coordination, I believe we are facing multiple specialized military units. Their regular navy used gravitational weapons. These new ships use dimensional technology. There may be others we have not encountered yet." The truth was worse than anyone imagined. Admiral Chen had not lied when she said Operation Thunderstorm was just the beginning. The Coalition was now facing Earth's Black Operations Units, military forces that officially did not exist and operated with technology that was beyond civilian understanding even within human space. The Wraith Division had been created in absolute secrecy 15 years earlier, when human intelligence first detected signs of the Coalition's expansion toward their territory. While Earth's regular military prepared for conventional warfare, a shadow organization worked on solutions that conventional militaries could not provide. They recruited volunteers for illegal genetic modification programs that enhanced human reflexes and intelligence beyond natural limits. They developed cybernetic implants that allowed direct neural interface with their ships, creating perfect coordination between pilot and machine. They built vessels using technology reverse-engineered from crashed alien ships that had been hidden from the public for decades. Most importantly, they ignored every treaty, every ethical guideline, and every moral restriction that limited Earth's regular forces. The Wraith Division existed for one purpose: to eliminate threats to human civilization by any means necessary, regardless of the cost to themselves or their enemies. Commander Helena Torres, known only as Harbinger to Coalition intelligence, led the Wraith Division from her flagship Phantom Strike. She had volunteered for the most extreme modification programs available. Her nervous system was laced with quantum processors, her skeletal structure reinforced with metamaterials, her brain enhanced with AI interfaces that let her process tactical information at superhuman speeds. She was no longer entirely human. None of the Wraith Division were. They had sacrificed their humanity to become something that could protect what humanity represented. Target assessment complete, her tactical officer reported. Like all Wraith personnel, he spoke in the flat, emotionless tone of someone whose brain had been altered to eliminate fear, doubt, and unnecessary emotional responses. Coalition shipyard at Theron Station. Estimated defenses, 4 battle fleets, orbital weapon platforms, planetary shield generators. Recommended approach: phase shift insertion followed by dimensional implosion charges. Approved, Harbinger replied without hesitation. Execute Operation Ghostwind. The attack on Theron Station was a masterpiece of impossible warfare. Wraith ships materialized inside the station's shields, appearing in locations where solid matter should have prevented their existence. Coalition defenders found themselves fighting enemies that could phase through walls, ignore energy weapons, and strike from directions that did not exist in normal three-dimensional space. The station's destruction took 43 minutes. Every Coalition vessel was eliminated, every defensive platform dismantled, every military installation reduced to expanding clouds of metallic vapor. The civilian population was left untouched. The Wraith Division did not wage war against non-combatants. But the military infrastructure that had taken the Coalition 50 years to build was erased in less than an hour. Similar attacks continued across Coalition space. Military targets were eliminated with surgical precision, while civilian populations remained unharmed. The message was clear. The Coalition's military forces would be destroyed, but surrender would save lives. Some Coalition commanders tried to adapt. They spread their forces across multiple systems to prevent concentrated attacks. They developed new sensor arrays to detect the strange energy signatures of Wraith ships. They even attempted to copy human dimensional technology based on recovered debris. Nothing worked. The Wraith Division operated according to principles that Coalition science could not understand, and tactics that their military doctrine could not counter. Worse, the attacks were having a psychological effect that traditional warfare could not achieve. Coalition forces began to fear empty space itself, knowing that death could materialize from nowhere at any moment. "We are not fighting a military force," Admiral Kexathera reported from her temporary command center. "We are fighting something that exists outside the normal rules of warfare. They appear from nowhere, ignore our weapons, destroy everything they target, then vanish without trace. Our forces are beginning to break under the psychological pressure. Then we adapt," Supreme Counselor Vex Mora declared. "The Coalition has faced impossible enemies before. We survived the Crystal Wars, the Void Incursion, the Hive Mind Rebellion. We will survive this as well." But privately, Vexamora wondered if they would. The Coalition had built their empire by being stronger, faster, and more ruthless than their enemies. Against humanity, they found themselves facing an opponent that the Coalition's last great fleet assembled at Corvex Prime, the most heavily fortified system in their empire. 50,000 ships from every corner of Coalition space gathered under the command of Grand Admiral Zarthok. the legendary warrior who had conquered more species than any other commander in galactic history. "This ends today," Zarthok declared to his assembled fleet commanders. "We have run from shadows long enough. We have cowered before ghosts and phantoms. No more. Today we make our stand. Today we show the galaxy that the Coalition cannot be defeated by any force, no matter how alien their technology." The plan was desperate but logical. Instead of spreading their forces across multiple systems where they could be picked off by small Wraith units, the Coalition would concentrate everything in one location. 50,000 ships supported by orbital defense platforms, planetary shields, and every weapon system they could deploy. When the humans came, they would face the entire military might of the Coalition in direct battle. "They cannot phase through all of us," Admiral Kexithara argued during the final planning session. "Their ships may ignore our weapons individually, but the combined firepower of 50,000 vessels will overwhelm whatever technology protects them. Quantity has a quality all its own." The fleet waited for 3 weeks. Long-range sensors detected no approaching human forces. The strange energy signatures that had preceded previous attacks were absent. Some commanders began to hope that the humans had decided the target was too well defended to assault. They were wrong. The humans were not coming to Corvex Prime. They were already there. The attack began from within the Coalition fleet itself. Ships that had been patrolling the outer perimeter suddenly turned their weapons on their own forces. But these were not Coalition vessels anymore. Somehow impossibly, human forces had replaced Coalition crews without anyone noticing. "Impossible!" Admiral Kexithara gasped as she watched friendly vessels opening fire on her fleet. "How did they infiltrate our ships?" "We have sensors, security protocols, genetic scanners. No one can simply replace an entire crew without detection." The answer came from Admiral Chen, whose face appeared on every screen throughout the Coalition fleet. But this was not the tired, reluctant commander who had spoken during their previous encounters. This Admiral Chen was younger, harder, with cybernetic implants visible along her jawline and eyes that reflected light like metal. "Coalition forces," she announced in a voice that carried no emotion whatsoever. "You are surrounded by elements of the Wraith Division. Your fleet has been infiltrated. Your command structure has been compromised. Your defensive systems are under our control. Surrender now and your deaths will be quick." "Who are you?" Grand Admiral Zarthok demanded. "You are not the same human who commanded their defensive fleet." "What happened to Admiral Chen?" "Admiral Chen returned to normal duties after Operation Thunderstorm," the enhanced Chen replied. "I am Harbinger Unit 7, temporary commander of Wraith Naval Operations. We assumed Admiral Chen's appearance to simplify communications. The human you met before was a regular military officer bound by laws of war and rules of engagement. We are not." As she spoke, more Coalition ships throughout the fleet began changing sides. Entire battle groups turned their weapons on their former allies. The massive formation that was supposed to represent the Coalition's strength became a chaotic free-for-all as vessels fired on each other in desperate confusion. "How many of our ships are compromised?" Zarthok asked his tactical officer. "Unknown, sir. Approximately 30% of the fleet has turned hostile, but we cannot determine which remaining vessels are still under Coalition control. The humans have somehow replaced our crews so perfectly that even our own sensors cannot tell the difference." The truth was even more horrifying than the Coalition suspected. The Wraith Division had not replaced Coalition crews, they had become them. Using technology that existed at the intersection of genetics, cybernetics, and quantum manipulation, Wraith operatives could literally reshape their bodies and minds to perfectly impersonate any species. The process was irreversible and drove most volunteers insane, but those who survived became the perfect infiltrators. They could think like their targets, speak like their targets, even believe they were their targets until activation codes triggered their true programming. The Coalition had been fighting an enemy that could become them at will. "All ships," Zarthok ordered desperately, "ignore previous formations. Consider any vessel that approaches within weapons range to be hostile. Fire on anything that moves. We will sort out the survivors later." But the order only made things worse. Coalition ships began firing on each other indiscriminately, unable to tell friend from foe. The carefully coordinated defensive formation collapsed into chaos as commanders made split-second decisions about which vessels to trust. Through the madness, true Wraith ships began to materialize. These were different from the phase-shifting vessels that had attacked previous targets. They appeared to be made of living metal that flowed and shifted like liquid, adapting their shape and configuration to match tactical requirements. Their weapons were not energy beams or missiles, but something far worse. "They are firing something at our ships," the science officer reported in a voice edged with panic, "but I cannot determine what the projectiles are. They appear to be information?" The Wraith weapons fired packets of compressed data directly into Coalition computer systems, not simple viruses or hacking programs, but complete alternate realities that overwrote the target ship's understanding of existence itself. Vessels struck by the data weapons would continue operating normally, but their crews would suddenly believe they were fighting for humanity instead of the Coalition. "This is not warfare," Admiral Kexathera whispered as she watched her fleet tear itself apart. "This is madness. They are not destroying our ships, they are converting them, turning our own forces against us through some form of technological mind control." "Admiral," her communications officer called out urgently, "I am receiving a priority message from Grand Admiral Zarthok. He is ordering all remaining Coalition forces to withdraw at a minimum safe distance and prepare for the Omega Protocol." Kexathera felt her blood turn to ice. The Omega Protocol was the Coalition's ultimate weapon, a planet-killer device that had never been used in actual combat. It was designed to sterilize entire star systems when no other option remained. "He cannot be serious," she breathed. "The Omega Protocol will destroy everything in this system. Our own forces, the orbital platforms, even Corvex Prime itself. Millions of Coalition citizens will die. Orders are confirmed, Admiral. Grand Admiral Zarthok has authorized total system sterilization. All ships are to retreat to jump distance and prepare for immediate departure." The few hundred Coalition vessels that remained under their own control began withdrawing from Corvex Prime, abandoning their positions and their infiltrated comrades. Behind them, the corrupted fleet continued its chaotic battle while Wraith ships moved through the confusion like predators, converting more vessels with each passing minute. Grand Admiral Zarthok watched from his flagship as the superweapon charged. The Omega device would generate a cascade reaction that would destroy every piece of matter in the system, including the stars themselves. It was genocide on a cosmic scale, but he saw no alternative. "Send a final message to Coalition High Command," he ordered. "Tell them the humans cannot be defeated by conventional means. They possess technology that turns our own forces against us. They can become us, think like us, replace us without detection. This is not a war we can win through strength of arms. What do you recommend, sir?" Zarthok stared at the tactical display showing the chaos at Corvex Prime. 50,000 Coalition ships reduced to a few hundred survivors in less than 2 hours. The greatest military force ever assembled, torn apart by an enemy that fought with weapons that should not exist. "Recommend immediate negotiations," he said quietly. "Whatever terms the humans demand. Full surrender if necessary. The Coalition cannot survive this war." As his flagship jumped to hyperspace, the Omega device fired. Corvex Prime and everything in the system vanished in a burst of artificial stellar collapse, taking with it the last great stronghold of Coalition military power. But even as they fled, Zarthok knew it was too late. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that transcended conventional warfare. They could infiltrate, convert, and corrupt on a scale that made physical destruction irrelevant. The Coalition faced an enemy that could turn their greatest strengths into weaknesses, their most loyal forces into enemies. For the first time in galactic history, the Coalition had encountered an opponent they could not defeat, could not understand, and could not escape. The war was over. They had lost. The only question now was whether humanity would allow them to survive their defeat. The Coalition High Council's final session took place in a bunker 3 kilometers beneath Zephyria Prime's surface. The Great Assembly Hall was a memory now, destroyed along with most of the planet's surface, installations by Wraith strikes that had seemed to target the very concept of Coalition authority. Only 12 representatives remained from the 47 species that had once ruled half the galaxy. The others were dead, missing, or had declared their species neutral in hopes of avoiding the systematic dismantling of their military forces. Even protected by layers of shielding and defensive systems that should have been impenetrable, the surviving counselors jumped at every shadow, knowing that death could materialize from nowhere at any moment. "We have lost," Supreme Counselor Vexmora announced, her ancient voice carrying the weight of absolute defeat. "In 6 months, the Human Wraith Division has eliminated 98% of our military capacity. Our fleets are gone. Our shipyards are destroyed. Our command structure has been so thoroughly infiltrated that we can no longer trust our own personnel. There must be something we can do, General Thokvar insisted, though his stone-like features showed the stress of constant fear. Some weapon we have not used, some tactic we have not tried. The Coalition cannot simply surrender to a species we intended to conquer. What would you suggest? Admiral Kexthera asked bitterly. She had somehow survived every engagement with human forces, but her survival felt more like punishment than luck. They can become us. They can think like us. They can replace us so perfectly that even we cannot tell the difference. How do you fight an enemy that can be anyone, anywhere, at any time? As if summoned by her words, the chamber's main screen activated. The face that appeared was that of Supreme Counselor Vexamora herself, but younger, with eyes that held depths of cold intelligence that the real Vexamora had never possessed. Coalition leadership, the false Vexamora announced. I am Harbinger, commanding officer of Earth's Wraith Division. I speak to you now wearing a face you trust because trust is a luxury you can no longer afford. Any one of you could be one of us. Any order you give might serve our purposes. Any thought you think might have been placed there by our psychological warfare specialists. The real Vexamora stared at her own face on the screen, with a mixture of horror and fascination. What do you want from us? Unconditional surrender, Harbinger replied without hesitation. Complete dissolution of the Coalition military. Immediate withdrawal from all territories claimed by force in the past 5 centuries. Reparations to species enslaved or destroyed by Coalition expansion. And absolute guarantee that no Coalition world will ever again pose a military threat to any other species. Those terms are impossible, General Thokvar protested. The Coalition is a civilization spanning dozens of star systems. Millions of our people serve in military roles. You are asking us to dismantle our entire society. I am offering you the chance to have a society at all, Harbinger corrected. Your current path leads to extinction. Not conquest, not defeat, extinction. The Wraith Division exists to eliminate threats to human civilization. You have made yourselves that threat. Continue to resist and we will solve the problem permanently. And if we surrender? Vexamora asked. What guarantee do we have that you will honor any agreement we make? For the first time, something like emotion crossed Harbinger's artificial features. You have seen what we can do when we choose to wage war without restrictions. In 6 months, we have reduced the galaxy's greatest military power to a handful of survivors hiding in bunkers. We have done this while following certain operational limitations. We do not target civilians, we do not destroy inhabited worlds, we do not use our most destructive weapons. Those limitations exist because we choose to maintain them, not because we are incapable of worse. The screen split, showing recordings from across Coalition space. Worlds that had once been fortress systems now stood defenseless. Their military installations reduced to ash, but their civilian populations untouched. Species that had fought the Coalition for generations were being contacted by human diplomatic teams offering aid and protection. You will honor surrender terms because the alternative is to discover what we can accomplish. When we stop being restrained by ethics, Harbinger continued, your choice is simple. Accept our terms and retain your civilization or continue fighting and lose everything, including your right to exist. Admiral Kexthera laughed bitterly. Right to exist? You speak as if you are judges of the galaxy, deciding which species deserve to live or die. In this case, yes, Harbinger replied without any apparent shame. The Coalition declared war on humanity. You chose to make survival a contest. You have lost that contest. Accept the consequences with whatever dignity you have remaining. The transmission ended, leaving the Coalition leadership alone with their impossible choice. They could surrender completely, and hope that humanity would honor terms that would effectively end the Coalition as a galactic power. Or they could continue fighting a war they had already lost against an enemy that seemed capable of redefining the very nature of warfare itself. Vote, Vexamora ordered. All in favor of unconditional surrender. The count was unanimous. Even General Thokvar, who had argued for continued resistance to the very end, raised his hand in defeat. They had no choice. The Coalition was finished as a military power regardless of what they decided. Surrender at least offered the possibility that some remnant of their civilization might survive. The surrender ceremony took place on Earth, in the same room where humanity had first received the Coalition's demand for submission. The irony was not lost on anyone present. Admiral Chen, the real Admiral Chen, tired and gray-haired and human, sat across from the coalition delegates with a mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. "The terms are non-negotiable," she stated as the documents were presented. "Complete demilitarization of all coalition worlds, dismantling of all offensive military technology, reparations to species harmed by coalition expansion, and permanent monitoring by human observers to ensure compliance." "What of the Wraith Division?" Vex Mora asked as she prepared to sign the documents that would end her civilization's dreams of galactic dominance.
"Will they be
retired?" Admiral Chen's expression grew somber. "The Wraith Division exists to protect human interests. As long as humanity faces potential threats, they will continue to exist. But they will return to the shadows where they belong. Most humans do not know they exist, and it is better that way. Your own people do not know what you have created. My people know that we defended ourselves successfully against an aggressive alien empire," Chen replied. "They do not need to know the methods we used or the prices we paid. Some knowledge is too dangerous for a free society to bear." As the documents were signed and the coalition's surrender was made official, Harbinger watched from a concealed observation post. The figure that had negotiated the coalition's defeat was no longer wearing Admiral Chen's face or anyone else's. The features were artificial, generated by technology that existed at the boundaries of human science. "Mission complete," Harbinger reported to shadows that might have been other Wraith operatives or might have been empty air. "Coalition military capacity eliminated. Terms of surrender include permanent monitoring and threat assessment. Wraith Division operations to continue in standby mode pending new threat evaluation." The war was over. Humanity had won not through superior numbers or better technology, but through the willingness to become something that their enemies could not understand or counter. They had created monsters in human form, soldiers who existed outside the normal boundaries of ethics and law, weapons that wore friendly faces and spoke with trusted voices. The galaxy was safe from the coalition, but the victory came with a terrible cost that only a few humans would ever know. In defending their civilization, they had created something that existed partially outside that civilization. The Wraith Division would return to their hidden bases and classified projects, officially non-existent but always ready to emerge when humanity needed them. And somewhere in the depths of space, in facilities that appeared on no maps and were acknowledged by no government, the real monsters that humanity had created went back to their work, preparing for the next threat, developing new weapons, becoming new forms of nightmare that would be ready when peaceful. Diplomacy failed and conventional warfare proved insufficient. The coalition had learned, too late, that humanity's regular army was never the real threat. The real threat was what peaceful people were willing to become when their survival was at stake. They had faced the monsters that civilization creates when it has no choice but to abandon civilization itself, and they had lost to something that was human enough to want peace, but inhuman enough to ensure it by any means necessary.